So we're studying the book of James, and I had a little bit of fun with the graphic for the series because James 1:1, in a particular version in the NASB, starts with these words. In fact, it's also, if you look at the Greek, this is how it says it. James 1:1 starts with these words, James Bond, servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what it says. It's just where you put the pause that makes a difference. Okay, so as we get started today, Bible trivia time. This is week 3 in the series. So first question, we're in the book of James. I've got prizes. Who was James's big brother? Oh, I heard that over here somewhere. I'm not sure. Congratulations. Jesus was James' big brother. James was Jesus' little brother. I gave you an easy one to start with. So they're brothers, Jesus and James. They've got a mum and dad. Who are their parents? Oh, I heard Leanne over here. Oh, bad throw. So, slightly more difficult question. James and Jesus, did they grow up rich or poor? Oh, I heard that over here somewhere too, but I'm not sure. Oh, way over there? Oh, here we go. Wake up. That was for whoever yelled out poor. So all indications are that James and Jesus and their family grew up poor. They grew up in a town called Nazareth. It was a really rural, poor, middle of the nowhere town in that day. Someone in the Bible once asked the question, can anything good come from Nazareth? It was that kind of town. It was like saying, can anything good come from Gympie? I hope the video feed's not going out yet. It is. It also tells us in Luke that when Jesus and James' family made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple in Jerusalem, they went to bring their sacrifice. And if you were someone who could afford it, you would bring a more valuable animal to sacrifice. But if you were poor, there was provision in the law to bring a lesser sacrifice, a smaller sacrifice. And James's family, Jesus' family, brought the lesser sacrifice, which is an indication of their lack of wealth. They were a poor family. So here's the next question, a little bit more challenging. Should Christians be rich or poor? Well, nobody's got the answer is yes. Hang on. The answer is yes. Here's the problem, though. It's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. And if you ask the wrong question, you'll head down the wrong path and you'll end up in the wrong place. Here's a better question. Should Christians be godly or ungodly? Godly. I heard that over here somewhere. Just never know where that is, so let's see where it lands. Well, that was pretty easy. Christians should, by the grace of God, be godly. So it doesn't matter if you are... Oh, let me get this a little closer. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It matters if you're godly or ungodly. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The question is, how are you living your life? How do you use your wealth? Not how much wealth you have, but how do you use it? Is it ungodly or godly? Now, this word godly or godliness gets thrown around, mentioned a lot in church circles. It's mentioned in the Bible. But what is godliness? What does it mean? What does it look like? How do we get it? We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But for now, let's just say the godliness is it's looking like Jesus, like God, God-like in our character, in our identity. It's not something that we earn or achieve. It's something that is imparted to us, given to us as we pursue God. It's like when you spend a lot of time at work or at school with negative people, you can become very negative, right? You don't mean to, but it just happens. And if you spend a lot of time with generous people, well, hopefully you'll learn to become more generous. It kind of rubs off on you. Well, the more you pursue God and the more time you spend with Him, the more your character will become like His character. Who you are, how you act, how you think. So what we're going to see today, in today's passage, is there are two categories of people, the rich and the poor. They appear in James chapter 1, starting in verse 9, and then they reappear later on in the book of James. And so in a moment we're going to read through these verses, and you can follow along in your own Bible, James chapter 1, or in the YouVersion Bible app. But before we do, I want to share with you the four categories. Two of them are mentioned here, but there are four categories of people that we see in the Bible. So there is the godly poor. The godly poor. Can you think of people in the Bible who were poor but were godly? Well, there are a lot of them, right? And we just looked at the fact that Jesus' family was a poor family, but they were also a very godly family. Jesus' mother and father were very devout. They were godly. He had a poor family, but a godly poor family. There are a lot of people in the Bible who are godly. They love the Lord, but they're poor. There's a widow in the Bible who gave a percentage of her income, and Jesus saw this, and He commented on her generosity. Although she was very poor, she was generous, godly. Jesus commends her as being godly with her wealth, with the little that she had. So godliness with regards to your wealth is about how you get it, how you invest it, how you tithe it, how you save it, and how you spend it. Now there's another category called the godly rich. Can you think of anyone in the Bible who is wealthy and godly? That's a great example. So this is about how they get their wealth, the way they share it, the way they spend it, the way they save it, the way they invest it. It's honest, noble, godly. There are a lot of people in the Bible, and Joseph in Egypt was overseeing a tremendous amount of wealth. He was second only to Pharaoh. He was godly, but he had great wealth. Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel, had a lot of influence in Babylon at the time. He was in a very prominent position, but he was godly. Nehemiah, another godly man, raises a great amount of money to rebuild the entire city of Jerusalem, essentially. Abraham was a very affluent man, but a godly man. Job was very rich. They lost everything, then he kind of got it all back again. Joseph of Arimathea, he's a wealthy guy, and when Jesus dies, he gives Jesus his own tomb. So there are some godly people in the Bible who are rich, godly people who are poor, godly people who are rich. The third category are the ungodly poor. The ungodly poor. Proverbs talks a lot about people who are just like that. They're poor because they're lazy, or they're poor because they gamble all their money away. They're poor because they get caught up in get-rich-quick schemes. They're poor because they get involved in unethical business practices and they end up in trouble. Just because someone's poor, and here's the point in this, just because someone's poor doesn't mean that they're godly. And just because someone's rich, where are we? Oh, I did one wrong there. Where am I? Aha, getting to it. Just because someone's rich doesn't mean they're ungodly, and just because someone's poor doesn't mean they're godly. The most well-known example of the ungodly rich. Wait a minute, I've lost my place, sorry. Okay, that's where we're up to. We're up to the ungodly rich. So category 4 is the ungodly, godly rich. All right, now I know where we are. So they're also mentioned in the Bible. A lot of them political leaders like Pharaoh, Herod, Nebuchadnezzar, godless people. Wealthy, powerful, but godless. They're ungodly, unlike God, very powerful and rich. Maybe the best known example of this is the guy who came to Jesus. He's called the rich young ruler. And he basically asked Jesus, how do I get eternal life? And Jesus says, well, you can't love money and me. You've got to pick between the two. And the Bible says he literally turned his back on Jesus and walked away because when it came down to it, he loved stuff more than he loved his Saviour. He was ungodly and rich. Category 4. So why do I give you these categories as we start out? Because I don't just want you to think, am I rich or am I poor? I want you to think, am I godly or am I ungodly? As we get into the book of James today, we're going to be dealing primarily with two of these categories, with category 1 and category 4. That's who James talks about in this passage. So here's the last question for you. Was Jesus rich or poor? Let me read you a verse from 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9. It'll come up on the screen. Here's what the Apostle Paul, how he answers this question. He says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. What he's saying is Jesus has known both great riches and poverty. So it's not about whether you're rich or poor, it's about whether you're godly or ungodly. See, it doesn't matter if you're rich or if you're poor. It matters if you're godly or ungodly. For eternity, Jesus ruled and reigned, King of kings, Lord of lords, in his heavenly home, and he was rich. I mean, the picture of heaven in Revelation is streets paved with gold. And then Jesus left all of that behind and came down to this earth, and he was poor. I mean, the Gospels record that he couldn't pay his taxes, that he had nowhere to lay his head, that he didn't have enough money to purchase his own tomb. So Jesus on the earth was quite poor. It says he went from glory to humiliation, from riches to poverty. So it's not about rich or poor. Jesus was both. It's about godliness or ungodliness. So grab your Bibles. We're in James. I'm going to read to you. First, he speaks to the category 1 people, and then to category 4. So this is Jesus' little brother, James, and this is what he had to say to godly poor, James 1, verse 9. He says, believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position. Now, first of all, he's writing to Christians. He says believers. And he says that these believers that he's writing to, he says they're poor. In our culture, we equate poor as lesser. We equate poor as lesser because we confuse our net worth with our self-worth. Poor is a struggle. Poor is undesirable. Poor is weak. We don't pay much attention to the poor. Poor have little power. They have no voice. They are overlooked. Anyone feel poor? I kind of do at the moment. My car that I've loved for many years has finally given up the ghost. A couple of weeks ago, it was worth a few $1,000s, and today it's worth $100 to a scrap merchant. I'm quite sad about that. So I'm kind of feeling a loss in my bank account, a loss in my net worth. Here's what happens though. So often we allow our net worth to determine our self-worth. You need to know that there's a huge difference. There is a huge difference between your net worth and your self-worth. in their day, like in our day, if you earn more, if you accumulate more, then you are more valuable. But although that may be true financially, it's not true emotionally, it's not true spiritually. Your net worth and your self-worth are not the same. In fact, there is no one more valuable than Jesus. Yet while he was on this earth, he was incredibly poor. Here's what James says. He says, take pride. Christians who are in, some translations say, lowly circumstance, humble circumstances, the poor. Take pride in that. Well, it sounds weird, to say, woo, I'm poor. Put a badge on me. I'm struggling. No one cares what I think. Take pride in that. He says, take pride in your high position. Now, this is what's called a paradox. For the English teacher in the room. G.K. Chesterton, the great British writer, said, a paradox is a truth standing on its head, shouting for attention. A paradox is a truth standing on its head, shouting for attention. Jesus says, you might be down here poor. You might be down here poor, but actually, you're up here godly. You might feel low in the world's eyes, but I see you up here. You see, the world grades on this line. The world grades on the wealth line. No, that's the top one, sorry. I did it wrong. There we go. The world grades on the wealth line, but God grades on the godliness line. And this is about our identity, who we are. Not how much we've got, but who we are. Here James is having a pastoral moment with his fellow believers. And I'm glad to have that same pastoral moment with you today, to say to you that you are not poor. In God's eyes, if you are a believer, if you're seeking to follow him, if you're seeking godliness, you're not poor. You are exalted. You're not unimportant. You are very important. You're not worthless. You are priceless. You're not someone that he can live without. You're someone who he can't live without. And sometimes we might say to that, but I'm not that great. And I would say, yes, but your Heavenly Father is that great. And he has a plan to make you great. So take pride in your high position. If you belong to the Lord Jesus Christ, there is a seat at the heavenly table already reserved for you, fully guaranteed and paid for. And between now and then, you need to see yourself as who you are becoming instead of who you have been. And you need to see yourself as how God sees you instead of seeing yourself as how others see you. If you do that, you can then take pride not in who you are, but in whose you are. Not in who you are, but in whose you are. And then James switches from category 1 to category 4. And now he speaks to the ungodly rich. And here's what he says to them, verse 10. But the rich, and he's specifically speaking to ungodly rich here, the rich should take pride, some translations say should boast, in their humiliation. Now, how many of you want to take pride or boast in your humiliation? I just got fired. Woo! I came last again. Let me just tell you all, we don't take pride in that. We don't boast in those things. Jesus says those who are humble will be exalted, and those who are exalted will be humbled. They're the only two options. There's a big difference between being humble and being humbled. The word humbled literally means humiliated. It's the same word. God tells those who are lowly, who are poor, to be humble and to let God exalt you. Because if you're godly, he will. And then he tells those who are arrogant, if you want to exalt yourself, he says to the ungodly rich, you will be humbled. You will be humiliated. Same word. You see, being humble is nice. Being humbled, not so nice. He goes on to say, because they will pass away like a wildflower. Verse 11, for the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its flowers fall, its blossoms fall, and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even as they go about their business. You know, there are so many things in this world, in our life, that we're surrounded by that push us down, that make us feel poor, humbled, lowly. And sometimes we struggle with thoughts like, man, maybe if I just had more. You know, more this, more that, more money. If I had more, I could make myself better. I could reinvent myself. Maybe I could change my clothes or fix my hair or learn a new skill or get a trade, get a better education, a better job, better car, another car. Then I wouldn't be lowly. Then I wouldn't be poor. I would be exalted. It'd be better for me. We're tempted to think like that, and that's where James comes in and says, hey, if you're lowly, if you're poor, rejoice and be glad that God is going to exalt you. If you're exalted, if you exalt yourself, if you're proud, if you're full of yourself, if it's all about you, he says, and it's a bit of a scathing kind of rebuke that he brings here. He says, you want to boast? You want to brag? Brag in the humiliation that you're going to receive. He says it's like a flower, you know, straight and tall, alive, flourishing, glorious. You don't even want to pick it because it's just so amazing. There are people like that, is what he's saying. Some people just, they look amazing. We look at them and we're like, wow, look at that guy. What an amazing person. And James says, but you know what? At the end of the day, the heat will come and the wind will blow and it will scorch and the flower will be gone. And so we need to live with the end in mind. We are like bottles of milk in the fridge. We've all got an expiry date. It's all going to come to an end sooner than we think. All that we have and all that we do, all that we think we are, comes to an end when we stand before God. And so much of what we've done and who we think we are just withers and dies. James is teaching us here what the solution is. He's saying whether you're rich or poor, neither is going to make any difference in eternity. It will just all fade away. Neither will help you get to eternity. But here's what will. Godliness. Wealth doesn't help us get into heaven. Godliness does. Here's the key to being godly. So jump down to verse 16. He says, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. He's addressing our identity here, and he's saying that God is the Father and that you are his loved children. You're dear to him. God adores you. God is committed to you. He has affection for you. Some of you say, but I'm not that special. Yeah, but he is. I'm not that good, but he is. I don't deserve it. None of us do. That's why we call it grace. Our Heavenly Father loves you. You are his dear child. Verse 17, every good and perfect gift is from where? From above, coming down from the Father. God's our Father, the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to, so he's the same, yesterday, today, and forever. Verse 18, he chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. There's so much in that, and I'll just pull out a few things. So first of all, he gives us a warning. He says, don't be deceived. Remember, he's writing to Christians here, just like us. You can be a Bible-believing, Spirit-filled, Jesus-following Christian, but you can still be deceived. You can believe the wrong things, things that are not true. You can live with an identity and a self-worth that is not from God. So how do I avoid this deception? Well, he says, by the word of truth. If you want to avoid deception, you need to familiarize yourself with the truth. If you want to combat the lies of the enemy, you need to know the truth. And the truth is found, he says, in the Word of God. Word of truth, he calls it. Because it's the truth that will set you free. Free from what other people say about you, free from what others think about you, free from who you've been told you are. And so spend time in God's Word, get God's Word into you so that when the enemy comes and he tells you his lies to try to deceive you, you're able to see it for what it is, because Jesus says, my sheep, they hear my voice and they know me. So we can tell the difference between the voice of Jesus through God's Word and the voice of the enemy who comes to lie, to kill, steal and destroy. Ultimately, the greatest gift that comes down from above is Jesus. And some of us, when we come to Jesus, we say, I'm poor, I'm lowly, I'm weak. I have nothing to give. And God is saying, give me you. Give me you. And you might say, but I'm not in that good a place. And God says, well, I'm a father, and I take care of my children, and I like to give good gifts to them, and to help them. If you give me you, I will change you. I will help you. I will exalt you. I will lift you up. I will love you. And one day, you will be exalted and lifted up and with me forever. Now, if you see your life in that way, if you see yourself as God sees you, that you are the recipient of such great gifts from a great God, that you are highly exalted and favored in his eyes because he loves you, because you're his child, he has adopted you into his family and given you an inheritance as though you were his firstborn son. Now, can I say, ladies in the room find that unnerving, but so do second-born sons and third-born sons. Because in that culture, the lion's share of the inheritance went to the firstborn son. And Jesus says, put your trust in me, and I will adopt you into my family and give you an inheritance as though you are the firstborn. Not the last adopted, but the firstborn son. And if we understand this about ourselves, we will be able to do exactly what James says here. Those of you in humble circumstances, the lowly, the poor, can take pride in our high position. You know, when you're at school, when you're at work, when you're in your neighbourhood and someone says to you, you know, you're just an idiot, you're obviously not a scientific type because you don't think like us, you're some religious nut, you're no good. Someone says that to you, you can know in your heart that you are a child of God, that you are highly favoured by him, that he has given you an inheritance that will outlast this world. You can take pride in your high position because you know that's where he wants us to be as his people, to get our eyes off how other people see us and to understand how the Father sees us and why he lavishes such good gifts upon us, because we're his children. We're his children, and he knows us, and he wants the very best for us. He wants us to have a family likeness. This is the family likeness. Godliness. It's as we turn ourselves over to him, spend more time with him, get to know him through his word, and start to look more and more like Jesus. You know, some of you here, I've had the privilege of walking a long journey with over many, many years. I've been here 15 years now. And some of you have been here for all of that time. Some of you have been here for a good part of that time. Some of you came here questioning faith. Some of you came here new to faith. And over time I've had the opportunity to see you exhibit a family resemblance. You look more like Jesus today than you did when I first met you. And that's what this is all about. It's about growing in our godliness, such that when God comes back for his own, he knows who they are, because they look like him. Yeah? And so our task is to pursue that, to pursue him, to so associate ourselves with him and fill our world, our lives, our thoughts, our habits with God, with time with God, with God's word, that it rubs off on us and we become those who carry a family resemblance as we walk around this earth, at school, at work, in our neighbourhoods. Well, let me pray for you as we wrap up our service today. Thank you, Lord, that you are a good, loving God, that you, in fact, have not left us to wander around this planet to work this all out on our own, but you've given us your word, you sent us Jesus to make a way for us to come to you. We recognise that we do not have it within ourselves to earn eternal life, to earn a relationship with you, to make right the damage, the wrong, the broken relationship that sin has caused, that break between us and you. But Jesus made that way. We thank you for sending Jesus. Jesus, we thank you for agreeing to leave your riches and glory in heaven to come and live as a poor, powerless and weak human being, and to give your life in our place, in our stead, that we don't have to pay the punishment for our sins, but you took our sin on you. You paid that price so that we could be a part of your family, so that we could be adopted into your family, so that we could be children of God. And as we put our trust, put our faith in you, Jesus, we know that you do a transforming work in our heart. First of all, positionally, we go from being lost to being found. We go from being a child of this world to a child of God in an instant, the moment we put our faith in you, the moment we trust in you, the moment we ask for you to apply what Jesus did on the cross to our lives. And then you do the work of making us like you over however many years we have left on this planet. We're not who other people say we are, we're who you say we are. And God, we pray that there would be that family resemblance, that godliness growing in each one of us, that we would put aside the things that slow us down in this race, that we would put aside the things that make us look more like the world and less like you, God, that we would leave those things behind. We don't need to identify with the world. Yes, we're in it, but we belong to you, Jesus.